Well, okay, my friends, let's do this. It is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. My name is David Parsons, and you are listening to News Trap. I welcome you to the program. I wonder how you're doing. I wanted to sort of take stock of where we're at mid-April 2025. I fully expect, I'm just going to start right out with the absolute bleak pessimism, and I apologize for that, but I do have some ideas about what we can do that I want to share during this episode too. But I fully expect that we will be in waves of the beginnings of a Great Depression by this summer. I could be wrong. I'd be glad to be singing "Happy Times Are Here Again" at some point in June, July, and August, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I think we are spiraling economically, and that's perhaps for another episode, because today I want to talk about the concentration camps. For a long time on this show, and just in the text messages between me and Justin and Andrew and other friends, we use the phrase, "see you in the camps," as a kind of way of wrapping up our conversations. And it always was sort of like a tongue-in-cheek joke that, we're heading towards a time where the government, whatever that might be, the administration, will be rounding people up and putting them in camps. And honestly, I've had that vision since the George W. Bush years, and maybe that's just a paranoid conspiracy theory, but the camps are real now. The camp, the prison in El Salvador that the Trump administration is using to test out its policy of deporting people without due process is a concentration camp. I don't think there's any way around that. In fact, the U.S. Holocaust Museum today issued a little tweet in which they said, what distinguishes a concentration camp from a prison in the modern sense is that it functions outside a judicial system. The prisoners are not indicted or convicted of any crime by judicial process. So there is the case of Abrego Garcia that is getting a lot of attention right now. And I want to think a little bit strategically today, not just about the absolute moral outrage of what's going on. I want to think about what we can do, because that's something that's been on my mind a lot. I don't like sitting around. I don't think anybody does, although maybe there is a kind of, sick, sadomasochistic element to sitting around and being like, it's just the worst. Things are so terrible. They're never going to get better. We can't do anything about it. That's a helpless position to be in. I understand feeling that way. I have felt that way most of my life. But I've also, studied a lot of U.S. history, and I think U.S. history is not unique. I think that these phenomena exist in the whole world, that there are things to do, that there are complicated ways that history moves. And I want to think about the connection between individual actions and sort of a collective moment as we move through this material today. But I do want to share a couple things about the Abrego Garcia case, a couple of screenshots that Justin sent that I think capture the situation for those that don't know exactly what's going on. This is a little bit about the legal terms of what the Trump administration is doing. So listen to this. It is critical to remember that although the Trump administration is testing out this legal strategy on an immigrant, there is no legal principle that restricts the plan to non-citizens. The Justice Department's current position, if ratified by the courts, would allow the government to send any American citizen to CCOT, then refuse to help bring them home. According to the Department of Justice, the Constitution does not protect anybody, citizen or not, from rendition to a foreign black site. To the contrary, the Constitution prohibits federal courts from demanding the return of a person deported to an overseas prison. In the Justice Department's view, the executive branch has absolute, unreviewable authority to leave them there forever, even if they were expelled unlawfully, and remain subject to ongoing unlawful banishment, torture, and potentially death. Put simply, this administration is creating a blueprint for the permanent disappearance of anyone for any reason, with no legal recourse whatsoever. So, big gulp. See you in the camps. Really disturbing shit. Connects to, I think, what Justin was talking about in last week's News Trap episode about the Hamilton glitch, he called it, and he identified, and I don't think he would want to take credit for being the sole identifier of this glitch, but I think it's a smart point from Justin. The idea that baked into the Constitution is this weakness of the courts and their inability to really enforce their decisions against an executive that's hell-bent on hurting people and doing these extra-legal things. Here's one more quick quote from this piece. Calling this a constitutional crisis undersells the catastrophic implications of the emergency. This administration is rapidly constructing a legal framework that would allow it to abruptly disappear anyone, including natural-born U.S. citizens, to a foreign prison forever, for any reason it chooses, or no reason at all. Indeed, Trump teased this possibility on Monday, floating the deportation of, quote, homegrown criminals to El Salvador next. The stakes of the battle over Abrego Garcia's fate could not be more evident. If the government succeeds in thwarting judicial repudiation of his deportation, it will mark the end of constitutional freedoms as we know them. So that's pretty stark. And I remember feeling this way again during the George W. Bush administration when they were legalizing torture and laying the groundwork for torturing people in CIA black sites and Guantanamo and other places like that. I mean, it's dark, bleak stuff, but I think it has accelerated dramatically because the Trump administration is aiming this shit not just at, the jihadi terrorists responsible for 9/11, and I know that there were innocent people caught up in that net then as well. But they're aiming this really at anyone who criticizes or protests what they're doing. And that part of it is terrifying. That part of it is insane. And that part of it is something that I think we're going to have to contend with one way or the other with all the courage and bravery in our hearts that we can. Because that's a red line to me. That's a new place. That they have the intent to disappear people to these horrific places and essentially kill them. And I didn't tweet, I don't have a Twitter. I think I put it on Instagram. That's the only place I exist on social media really anymore, and I barely do that because I hate the medium. I really do. But I do feel the need to share things every once in a while. And yesterday I shared the photo of the dude that set fire to Josh Shapiro's house on the night of Passover. It was clearly like an act of a Nazi terrorist, and the picture of him is a disturbing one. The guy looks like a fucking lunatic. But either way, my kind of pithy social media point was like, is this guy going to be sent to El Salvador, or is that just reserved for school teachers who wear Free Palestine t-shirts? But I mean, that's a pithy social media point, but it's kind of what's going on. The Trump administration is, testing out these waters intentionally and is choosing student leaders of, pro-Palestinian movements on college campuses for a reason. They want to test out their ability to disappear people who contradict what they are doing. And yesterday there was a couple people at a Marjorie Taylor Greene town hall who stood up and yelled something at her, and they were taken out. The videos are incredibly disturbing. They were taken out by cops who were using stun guns and tasers on them, and as they're tasing them, the crowd is yelling, cheering, laughing. Marjorie Taylor Greene has a big smile on her face. It's all LOL to these people. And I think that's part of what I wanted to get out today too, is that when we're considering evil, really, truly evil. I think Caroline Leavitt is the name of the White House press secretary who said, is Abrego Garcia suddenly father of the year? LOL. Like, this is evil shit. These people are not the kind of people that I look to and seek to forgive in any way. I'm not a Christian. I'm compelled by Christian doctrine for sure, but I'm not a Christian. I don't think that I have forgiveness in my heart for Stephen Miller and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Elon Musk. These people, to me, are the epitome of evil, and they have to be eradicated from our human project. And how that eradication takes place, I don't know. And I do want to talk a little bit about what we do, but I don't think of this as a kind of contest of winning these people over to our side when they are hurting people badly and have big smiles on their face while they're doing it. They are sadists, ultimately. And that sadism is empowered right now, and that's part of that Hamilton glitch. Is like, holy shit, what happens when that sadism is activated, empowered, and saying fuck you to the Supreme Court, right? And obviously, we're still in the beginnings of this moment in which the Trump administration is openly defying court orders. But it's a turn. To me, it's an important development in a dark story that we're all caught in. And I know there are a lot of people who listen to this program. I wish there were more, but there are still a lot of people who listen to Nostalgia Trap. And over the years, I've noted in the Patreon comments and various social media disputes that that people have a lot of different political ideas, obviously. But I think that the people who listen to this show are broadly on the left. And the way I would define that now, to me, is like, who's on our side, right? To me, anyone is on my side who is repulsed by the Trump administration, who is disgusted by the direction of our society right now, and who has empathy for the people who are being hurt by this, and they want to do something about it. So I saw a lot of people kind of sneering at the protests that are happening, saying like, well, they're all a bunch of white middle-class people. Yeah, they are. We need those people. I mean, my parents are very much white middle-class people. They've never been involved in protests their whole lives, and they lived through the 60s and 70s. They've never been part of activism at all. They're going to a protest this weekend. And 2 weeks ago, there was a huge protest here in Ventura County. And my parents are, they're very protest curious because they're sort of watching TV and disgusted and feeling helpless about what's going on. And they texted me and said, they were crying while they were watching these protests. They were sort of emotionally overwhelmed by seeing other people in the streets who feel the same way they do. So I think all of that is just to say, I think the left needs to, the left liberals, the good people, I'll put it that way, need to embrace a big tent right now. I need to embrace the idea and not be gatekeeping. And I've been guilty of that myself on this show many times over the years. I openly wanted this show from the beginning to sort of track my own blind spots, my own failures, my own political evolution as we move through really challenging historical moments. And right now, in 2025, in April, I'm a big tent guy. I'm like, let's get everybody together that's pissed off about this. Because right now, Trump is in a hole politically. And what I mean by that is his numbers are negative 22 among independents. The people that voted for him that are not really MAGA people, that are just like, they just voted for him because they didn't like the direction of the country, they wanted to change. Those type of people, and we can rip on them all we want, but those are important people. They're an important bloc. They're hating Trump right now. So we need to fuel that fire, and I think that's an important thing. So what do we do? I've watched a ton of, political lecture videos. At one point before YouTube, before the internet, you could go to, I don't know, record stores, and you could get DVDs and at some point, I guess, like cassette tapes and CDs, analog media, physical media of left-wing material, political material. Lectures by Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and a whole bunch of others. Naomi Klein. And that was really my political education, was listening to those things and watching those DVDs and trying to show them to my friends who were really bored by them usually. But one of the things I noticed during all of those, it was kind of a hallmark of all of those political videos and all that material, was that at the end of whoever's lecture, there was always like a Q&A. And the thing that happened is that usually the lecturer would, and if you've watched a Chomsky lecture, you know what this is like. He would give a sort of like hypnotic rendering of how bad shit is. And you'd be like, holy shit, I didn't know. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. And that's part of why I wanted to share it with people. It's like, do you know how bad it is? And Chomsky has a unique way of doing that. And I think his affect, his sort of presentation is powerful. But either way, there'd be a Q&A at the end from all these like stunned college students or wherever they were, people at coffee shops, and they would come up to the mic, and the question, someone would inevitably ask the question of like, what do we do? Like, oh, you've told us how bad it is. What do we do? Like, people, in other words, really had a desire to know what action they could take, what organization they could join. They wanted Chomsky to tell them, here's what you go do. Sign up for this, pay for this, support this. And, Chomsky and Howard Zinn and Naomi Klein and all the others, they always had, the same sort of answer, which I think was unsatisfying to the crowd often. And I think it is an unsatisfying answer, which is like, well, there are a lot of things you can do. But if you look at history, the things that have shifted when things go wrong, the things that have shifted the zeitgeist and made things go in a different direction, was collective action, was groups of people coming together in a popular way to demonstrate their disapproval, but also to come up with ideas for how to move things in a different direction. For Americans, there are a couple different historical moments we point to. I think the most common ones are maybe the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, really. Okay, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s. It's a long movement. But yeah, the movement for equality for black people in this country is one in the 20th century that people point to, because if you read books about that stuff, you realize that we were sold a lie in school about heroes, about like Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream," and white people around the country heard that speech and they all cried and said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," and made black people equal. That's not what happened. It was actually much more of a boring story, and I don't think it's boring. I think it's like less spectacular and less sort of individually oriented, and that's what I mean by boring. It was a struggle. The Black freedom struggle was the term that I was introduced to in graduate school. The idea that it took a lot of work. There were people that were heroes, but their names are unknown, and they were doing things like collecting signatures, or they were doing things like letting people use their gas station for free during bus boycotts so that they could carpool and create some sort of infrastructure transportation in order to achieve that boycott. I mean, there are a million stories. I always love hearing about like people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who I think is more of a well-known figure and definitely a hero, but someone who was really like an administrator when it comes down to it. Like Fannie Lou Hamer was an organizer in the South who really understood how to get people together, how to maintain coherent strategies. All of that stuff, I think, needs to be reactivated. There is a lot of energy. A lot of people are pissed. But I do think we need to move past the sort of hashtag resistance era where we just sort of demonstrate in the street and that's it. There needs to be some shape to what we're doing. I think we're going to have to do acts of civil disobedience. We're going to have to re-engage all that like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. stuff and maybe some Malcolm X stuff and a whole bunch of stuff that maybe we haven't even thought of yet. But we do need a further imagination on the left in terms of how to confront this stuff. There are a lot of, I think there is this kind of syndrome on the left that's, we've talked about it before, as a kind of like hero syndrome, the kind of John Brown syndrome, the idea that like we can't think of all of that work sounds like too much work and we want something spectacular. This is like infected the left, honestly, because like during the reaction to October 7th, right, and the actions of Hamas in staging a giant terrorist attack, so many people on the left were like into that and into like Sinwar, the guy that like made that decision. And I don't want to get into the politics of that again. I'm trying to be a big tent guy here. But what Sinwar and Hamas did is sort of like in that John Brown mode, like a spectacular act of violence. And I saw so many people who were on the left sort of like saying, well, what else is there to do? Nothing else works. You have to use violence. And sort of like, well, I don't think that's how slavery ended in America, for instance. Slavery didn't end because John Brown killed some slave owners with a broadsword. As cool and Tarantino-esque as that sounds, it's very cool, very like ripe for memes and stuff like that. It was abolitionism as a massive popular movement lasting years, doing real work to eventually, become a giant state project. That's what ended slavery, right? And the same thing with the civil rights movement. The spectacular acts of violence that were sort of called for by groups like the Black Panthers or even the Weather Underground in the later era, in the late 60s and early 70s. They didn't really accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, and many of them later expressed regret over what they did. Just like so many Palestinian people today express regret over what Sinwar did, the strategy that Hamas sort of perpetrated, because the end result was giving Israel a blank check to commit a massive, unprecedented slaughter of their people. Was that worth it? I don't know. It doesn't sound worth it to me. But the hero complex is one we need to get over. We also need to get over the idea of shaming each other. I saw, and this is hashtag resistance shit a little bit, but there are other ends of it. But yesterday, and I've been seeing this a lot, and you've probably seen it too, all these people driving Teslas that have the bumper stickers that say, I bought this before Elon went crazy or something like that. I saw one yesterday that was so on the nose, and I was like, wow, that's really it. The sticker said, I drive this in shame now. And I was sort of like, is that what we need, really? A lot of people like expressing their shame of driving a Tesla? Is that moving the dial at all? Like, we need to get over the sort of like feeling of individual shame about what you're doing or not doing. I don't know. I saw a post, and again, this is social media stuff, but you see this a lot, and I think it's a very common attitude. This is a very common meme. I'm sure you've seen it, which is like, if it's got this tone, it's like, hey, if you were wondering what you would be doing during the Nazi Holocaust, it's whatever you're doing right now. And it's sort of like this idea of like, if you're not doing something right now to stop the march of the Trump administration, then you are guilty of the cowardice that people expressed during the Hitler years, right? Like, I'll give another example of this that I think is, one we've mentioned on the show before, we've had fun with, but it sort of has shifted in my mind over the years. Because this movie, Saving Private Ryan, the Spielberg movie about World War II, I'm sure you've seen it, but, I can't assume that anymore. because it's an old movie. That movie came out 27 years ago, which actually blows my mind. But 1998 is when Saving Private Ryan came out. But honestly, I'm still thinking about that particular, the particular character that's at the heart of the story is the character of Upham, the little interpreter guy who is sort of a pacifist who doesn't want to fight and doesn't want to kill people. At the end of the movie, they're like pinned down in this massive battle, and there's hand-to-hand combat happening, and he is sitting on the stairs, with all the extra ammo as a Jewish American soldier. I mean, Spielberg really weighted this. The meaning of this scene could not be more clear, I think. But a Jewish American soldier is fighting hand-to-hand combat with a Nazi, and a Nazi is like pushing a knife into his chest. It's like really, really intense and violent, and he could be saved by this Upham guy if Upham would only find his courage to get up off the stairs and go inside where this fight is happening and help the Jewish American soldier from being killed by the Nazi. But that's not what he does. And the result is you, as a viewer of the film, feel an intense rage at Upham for being a coward and not acting to save the Jewish American soldier. And, I think that obviously Spielberg is making a pretty broad, metaphorical sort of statement there about people who sat on the fence, people who sort of normalized the Nazi project, people who were unwilling to move their own moral dial to the place where it needed to go in order to destroy the Nazis and confront Hitler, etc. So in other words, he's saying, there were people who were unwilling to see how serious it was and how much the solution was a violent confrontation, and they needed to do that. I've gone back and forth over that scene many times over the years, but the post that you see where you're sort of like, if you're not doing something right now, you're a fucking coward piece of shit. I don't know if that's helpful either. I don't think it's useful to shame people for feeling paralyzed and fearful right now. There are, I'll put this in my own personal terms. I don't know what to do, and I'm not spending every moment of my life strategizing how to defeat the Trump administration because it's not clear. Things are forming right now. I think we need to be, in other words, much more open and forgiving of each other. As much as I have no forgiveness in my heart for the Stephen Millers of the world and want them to be destroyed and want their project to be disemboweled. At the same time, I think we need to have a much more open attitude towards each other and not be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why didn't you do this? Why aren't you doing that? That sort of attitude is not going to be helpful in creating the kind of broad, popular political movement we need in order to confront the depth of evil and sadism, and really legally empowered evil and sadism that we are confronting. Because if we're at a point where the Supreme Court can't tell the Trump administration what to do, which I think Justin pointed out rightfully has always been the case, but no one's really gone so far as to actually take advantage of that in this way, then we're at a point where the people themselves are going to have to be that safeguard. And again, it's not going to be pretty. I don't think there's going to be one hero that we point to and say, he did it, she did it, they're the ones that saved us. We have to save us, and doing that will include people doing all sorts of things, including, and I want to underline this, including doing just living their lives, including just raising your children with joy. And I don't want to be a hippie here, but there is something to be said about remaining human as we move through this. I've been going to a place that I'm very lucky to have in my neighborhood a jazz club, believe it or not. It's like it's the fucking 1940s. But there's a jazz club in my neighborhood, and I've discovered this sort of jazz community. A lot of people who like to come listen to that music every night. It's live music. And as I sit there and I watch every night these crowds moving and dancing and sort of enjoying each other, I really am struck by the thought that, like, that's vital as well. Like, that bit of joy with each other, not online. I'm really, a stickler for physical space here and sharing space with each other and being human together. But, like, those spots and those moments are vital for maintaining our humanity in the face of what the Trump administration is trying to do with us. So I don't have specific answers about what to do. I don't think we need to be looking for individual heroes or shaming each other for not doing the exact right thing. I think we need to keep open minds, open hearts. I'm going to sound like Friday Night Lights coach right now. But, like, is it full hearts? Full? Yeah, you get it. Like, you can't lose if you're if you're moving forward with compassion. And I think that's part of what we need to keep in mind. So this weekend, April 19th, I know there's going to be huge protests this weekend. I think people are really, really energized. If you look at what Bernie Sanders and AOC, who are the only good Democrats, are doing out there, and I don't know if you consider Bernie Sanders a Democrat or if he considers himself a Democrat, but certainly within that milieu and connected to that party. And I don't have a problem with that, honestly, because I don't see a functional left party right now. And that's been true for a very long, long time. We need to sort of face the fact that when 35,000 people show up at a Bernie Sanders rally when he's not running for office at all, there's energy there, and we need to harness that instead of complaining about, like, it not being the right party or the right person, etc., etc. We need to get on the horse, and we need to figure out how to maintain that energy and grow it, and show the Trump administration that they can't get away with demeaning us in this way. So that's my piece. I wonder what you all think. I appreciate you being News Trap listeners, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.